I was on sanitation duty when humanity ruined my week. That is not metaphorical. It is not poetic. It is not the kind of sentence a person says for dramatic effect before asking for sympathy. I mean it very literally. I was standing in Biowaste Corridor 3, ankle deep in the sort of foam that only appears when a junior tech mixes cleaning acid with nutrient gel, and I was trying to convince a clogged recycler tube to remember its purpose in life when Director Varro called my name over the station speakers. Not my title, not my rank, my name. That was the first sign something had gone terribly wrong. On Station Helix, when a director uses your actual name, one of two things is happening. Either you are about to receive a commendation so boring it can induce hibernation, or you are being dragged into a problem large enough to be measured from orbit. Lio, report to Sector 9, immediately. The speakers clicked off. I stood there in silence, foam dripping from my gloves. Then Brick, the recycler tube specialist, leaned out from behind a filter stack and said, "That sounded personal." "It was personal," I said. "Are you in trouble?" "Yes." "Did you do anything?" "No." He nodded wisely. "Those are the worst kinds of trouble." Brick was not an intelligent being in the formal academic sense, but he did possess a rare talent for arriving at painful truths faster than trained analysts. I peeled my gloves off, threw them into the sterilizer slot, and trudged across Helix with the feeling of a condemned man walking toward a banquet he had accidentally insulted. Sector 9 was not my territory. Sector 9 belonged to Genomics Command, which meant polished floors, cold lights, expensive equipment, and people who used too many syllables in casual conversation. My own sector smelled of burned wiring and antiseptic shame. Sector 9 smelled like arrogance. When the security doors opened, I found Varro waiting with 2 armed guards and a face like a sealed coffin. That was the second sign. Directors do not wait for sanitation officers. "Leo," he said. "Director, you are now reassigned." "Wonderful. To what?" He stared at me. When Varro stared, lesser organisms evolved into fossils. "To project mirror." I almost laughed. Then I noticed the guards were not ceremonial. "Oh," I said, "that kind of reassigned." "Yes." "Should I be worried?" "Yes." "Excellent. I prefer honesty." He motioned for me to follow. "Walk." So I walked, past white walls, past glass labs, past sealed observation rooms, past a smell I could not place at first, until memory caught it by the throat. Warm iron, salt, organic heat, blood. Now that may not sound remarkable to you, if you belong to a species that keeps blood in the casual daily rotation, but the Kell did not evolve with circulating liquid hemoglobin. Most station personnel hadn't smelled raw blood outside museum exhibits or combat archives, yet there it was, faint and metallic, riding the filtered air like a threat with good manners. "What happened?" I asked. "A containment incident." "With what?" Varro kept walking. That was the third sign, and by then I no longer wanted answers. Answers are only fun when they are small. Large answers come with forms, funerals, or both. We reached the inner lift. The guards keyed codes into separate panels. A scanner examined my eyes, my palms, my breath signature, and, for reasons I still do not understand, the left side of my neck. Then the lift dropped so far my inner balance sacks threatened legal action. Sector 9 had levels below the official map. Of course it did. When the doors opened, the first thing I saw was shattered glass. Not cracked, shattered. Thick observation glass, the expensive kind layered with reactive mesh, blown outward across the corridor in glittering heaps. The second thing I saw was a bent security door with grooves in it. Grooves, not tool marks, not impact dents. Grooves, as though something with hands had gripped reinforced alloy and become briefly offended by its existence. "Director," I said carefully, "what exactly is Project Mirror?" He answered without looking at me. "An adaptive clone initiative." That sentence should have remained stupid. Instead, he added, "Human." I stopped walking. Varro turned. "Keep moving." "You cloned a human?" You attempted to clone a human." "Yes. And now there is blood in the air, destroyed security glass, claw marks in a war-grade door, and I, a sanitation officer, am standing in the middle of it." "Correct." "Am I here to clean up?" He hesitated, which told me everything. I pointed at myself. "You brought me because I'm the one who has spent 6 years crawling through station maintenance shafts and waste channels, and if something dangerous is hiding in your walls, you want the poor idiot who knows the walls better than anyone." Varro folded his hands behind his back. "You adapt quickly." "No. I panic efficiently. That got the faintest twitch from one of the guards. Not a smile. Helix security did not smile in restricted sectors, but a twitch. I treasured it. We entered the primary lab. I wish I had not. You must understand something about modern cloning. Every culture thinks they have done away with the old horror of it. No floating limbs, no failed bodies in rows, no twitching shadows behind glass. Very civilized. Very sterile. Elegant lighting, soft interfaces, quiet machines. Tragedy with budget approval. Project Mirror had all of that and somehow made it worse. The chamber at the center of the lab was open, its growth cylinder cracked along one side. The fluid inside had drained across the floor in a pale amber sheet. Restraint cables hung loose like dead snakes. A med cart had been overturned. 3 scientists were being treated in the far corner. One had a broken arm. One had a face I suspect no longer matched their official records. The third simply stared at nothing and muttered over and over. It looked at me. It understood. I hate it when people say things like that. Nothing good ever follows. A slim female Kell in a gray research coat strode toward us. Director, report Senna. Senna, chief geneticist. Famous, decorated, smug in at least 9 peer-reviewed publications. At that moment she looked as if someone had replaced her nerves with sharpened wire. Her gaze moved to me. Why is sanitation here? Because fate despises me, I said. Varro ignored that. He knows Helix infrastructure. Bring him up to speed. Senna inhaled once through her teeth. Fine. 3 cycles ago, after 18 months of controlled genetic reconstruction, we achieved viability in Mirror Subject 1. The human template was assembled from recovered tissue records, battlefield medical scans, public physiological archives, and neural behavior predictions. I understood some of those words. I said, do the useful version. She gave me a look people usually reserve for difficult stains. We built a human. There. See? Was that painful? It was incomplete, she snapped. Not a natural-born human. A precision clone with accelerated maturation, conditioned language imprinting, motor calibration, and behavioral observation. Still sounds like we built a human wearing a fancy coat. Senia's eye ridge twitched. I was beginning to enjoy myself, which in hindsight was a symptom of head trauma. Varro said, continue. She pulled up a holo display. A figure rotated in blue light. Male, tall, dense musculature, heavy skeletal structure, human facial symmetry, though sterner than most archived examples, dark hair, scar pattern along the jawline, included from original source tissue because apparently someone in the lab thought authenticity mattered while assembling the galaxy's worst idea. Designation, Mirror 1. Behavioral metrics flashed beside it. Adaptability, pattern absorption, stress response, spatial awareness, every category was too high. Even I could see that. The intention, Senna said, was controlled study. Humans are physically resilient, cognitively flexible, and uniquely nonlinear in crisis environments. Every military and scientific body in charted space has tried to explain how a species this unstable keeps surviving events that should reduce them to historical footnotes. Yes, I said, humans are famous for being both fragile and impossible. We have all seen the reports, that noble tradition of reducing disasters to grammar. Everyone knew the stories. Human ships limping home with half their hulls missing. Human soldiers continuing to fight on broken limbs because someone had insulted their squad. Human medics performing surgery under active fire while arguing about recipes. Human engineers who, when told a reactor was beyond repair, interpreted that as a personal insult and returned 30 minutes later with a functioning reactor and a grin that suggested either victory or madness. The galaxy had spent 2 centuries trying to decide whether humans were admirable or a clerical error in reality. Then Project Mirror had decided to make one in a lab. Because apparently we had not suffered enough. What went wrong? I asked. Senna stared at the rotating image as if it had betrayed her personally. Everything looked stable. Growth rate was within tolerance. Motor function excellent. Language acquisition extraordinary. Too extraordinary in retrospect. We spoke around the chamber. It listened. By day 5 it understood 3 station dialects. By day 8 it was asking questions. I blinked. How old was it physically? Equivalent to 27 human years. Right, of course. Why make a small mistake when you can make a large adult one? It was under restraint, she said sharply. Observation only, limited movement, no external access. And yet the glass exploded. Senna swallowed. It began asking about the original. The original what? The original human source. That chilled the room more than the broken chamber did. Varro spoke quietly. We used military remains recovered from the siege at Haron Gate. The human had been dead for years. I looked at the hollow again. The scar on the jaw. The shoulders. The deliberate stillness in the archive stance. Not a civilian. Not even close. What was he? I asked. Neither of them answered immediately. That is another thing I hate. Finally Senna said, a combat officer. Wonderful. You cloned one of the galaxy's famous impossible survivors, and you picked a military one. We did not intend to preserve memory, but you did preserve instinct. Her silence admitted it. I rubbed my face. Tell me the containment incident. Senna nodded stiffly. During the second behavioral interview, Mirror 1 asked why its body was restrained. We told it the truth in partial form, that it was understudy, that it was unique. It asked whether it was alive. I stared. Varro's voice stayed cold. No one answered quickly enough. That, strangely, was the most believable detail so far. Scientists presented with the single most important question a living thing can ask, and they paused to improve the wording. Senna continued. It became agitated. Heart rate elevated. Muscular output spiked beyond projection. It tore the left restraint, then the right. Security foam was deployed. It used the restraint post as a lever and shattered the chamber wall. 2 security teams entered. It disarmed the first without killing them. It broke the arm of the second team lead. It took a shock baton, disabled the lights, and vanished into service access. I looked at Varro. Without killing them, no fatalities. That mattered. It mattered a great deal. A being born into a cage, lied to, restrained, attacked, terrified, and it had chosen not to kill. Humans, always making matters morally inconvenient. Senna enlarged the schematic of Helix. Red pathways spread through the maintenance spine. It has been moving for 6 hours. It avoids main corridors, intercepts camera angles, and uses pressure differentials to predict patrol routes. I pointed. That route cuts through the recycler arteries. Yes, Varro said, which is why you are here. I exhaled slowly. You need someone who can track movement through vents, access locks, waste channels, and service ladders. Yes. And if I find your illegally manufactured human soldier, Varro met my eyes. You keep him talking until security arrives. I laughed. I truly did. Not because it was funny, though it was, in the same way a collapsing bridge is funny when you are still standing on land and someone else is not. I laughed because the absurdity had finally reached a kind of artistic perfection. You want me, I said, pointing to my chest, Leo of sanitation, unclogger of nutrient drains, patron saint of leaking pipes, to locate a grown human combat clone hiding in the walls, and then converse with him politely. Varro said, You talk more than anyone on the station. We considered that an asset. I turned to Senna. And you? I considered it noise, she said. Excellent. I feel cherished. A new voice came from the side door. You should be. We all turned. Commander Even entered with 6 security officers in full armor and an expression that had never once approved of joy. He was broad-shouldered, scarred, disciplined, and famous for having a tactical mind so rigid it probably folded itself before sleep. Sector access is sealed, Ivan said. Docking clamps are locked, external comms restricted. We conduct a full sweep, corner the subject, and sedate. Sedate, I repeated. Yes, because I'm sure the being that just peeled open a restraint rig will react beautifully to darts. Ivan did not look at me. Who is he? Guide support, Varro said. Civilian staff. Station staff, I corrected. Ivan finally looked my way, and I understood at once why his recruits aged badly. If you interfere with my operation, I will have you confined. If your operation gets me killed, I will file a complaint. You will be dead. Then it will be a strongly worded haunting. Another tiny twitch from one of the guards. I was on a streak. Varro stepped between us before Ivan could decide to demonstrate his authority by compressing my skull. Enough. Ludo goes with Squad 2. He knows the infrastructure. Ivan disliked that. Good. It gave me something warm to hold in my heart. We suited up. By we, I mean the security teams armed themselves like a small war, and I was handed a locator pad, an earpiece, a utility cutter, and a stun rod whose charge meter was so low it insulted me on principle. Is this a joke? I asked. The quartermaster said, that is what was available. Then the joke is very expensive. I followed Squad 2 into the service arteries beneath Sector 9. Now this was my world. Narrow steel ladders, low conduits, damp air, vibrating walls. Heat exchangers hissing like annoyed reptiles. Pipes tagged in 5 decades of repair code. Half of it obsolete, all of it somehow still in use because nothing in a station ever truly dies. It just gets relabeled, patched, and threatened. The squad leader Tan moved ahead with disciplined caution. Behind him came 4 armed officers and me, trying not to breathe too loudly. "You have been in these shafts before?" Tan whispered. "I have been in all of them. Some of them twice, if you count regrettable accidents. What would a human do in here?" I thought about that. Hunt airflow. Avoid open intersections. Seek tools. Seek food if he's learned hunger. Seek clothing if he wants to blend. And if he's smart, which he is, he will double back through maintenance loops so your trackers think he's going forward while he's behind you. Tan glanced over his shoulder. Comforting, I try. We descended another ladder. At the bottom I crouched by a panel and touched the edge. Bent. Not much. Barely visible. But bent. "Stop," I whispered. The squad froze. I pointed the light. On the floor, in a patch of condensation dust, there were footprints. Bar. Human. I know many species romanticize footprints. The first step on a world. The last step before sacrifice. The lone print by the door. Very dramatic. In practice, most footprints simply tell you something heavy went where it should not have gone. These, however, were different. The stride length was measured, balanced. No panic stagger, no blind flight. He had not been running. He had been choosing. Tan signaled 2 officers left, 2 right. I leaned closer to the print. There was a smear beside it. Dark and dried. Blood. Human blood. Not much. One look. "Enough. He's injured," one officer whispered. "Maybe," I said. "Or one of your friends left him a souvenir." We followed the prints into cooling loop 7, where the conduits widened into a maintenance crawl with side vents overlooking half the lower deck. The tracker pad chirped once, then lost signal, then reacquired it above us. Tan muttered, "He's inside the walls." "No," I said, "he's in the ladders between walls." "How do you know?" "Because if I were hiding from you, that's where I'd go." Tan stared. "Please do not write that down anywhere official." We split. Half the squad moved upward to ladder spine 4. Tan kept me with him and 1 rear guard. I considered this an administrative insult. As we approached the ladder shaft, I heard it. Breathing. Not ours. Slow. Controlled. Close. Tan raised his rifle. I put out a hand. He looked at me as if I had lost structural integrity. Then a voice came from above us, calm and deep and entirely too human. "If you fire, the round will ricochet in this shaft. You will hit your own man." Nobody moved. That was the moment. More than the broken glass, more than the blood, more than the restraint marks, when the thing became real. A voice, a person, not a subject, not a specimen, a voice. Tan aimed upward. "Show yourself." The voice answered, "That sounds unwise." I swallowed. "You are learning fast." A pause. Then, "You are not security." "No, I clean things for a living." "Did they send you to insult me?" "Often, but not officially." A soft sound drifted down. Not laughter exactly, more like surprise discovering it had a sense of humor. Tan hissed. "Quiet." The voice ignored him. "What's your name?" That question hit harder than it should have. Tan snapped, "Do not engage." I stared up into the dark shaft. "Lizzo." Another pause. "Then Leo, did they tell you what I am?" Behind me the rear guard shifted. Tan's weapon stayed raised. "Yes," I said. "And there are moments in life when you can hear the future leaning in. Say the wrong thing, and it opens its jaws." I took a breath. "They told me what they made. That's not the same as what you are." Silence. Then the rear guard screamed. Something dropped past us so fast I barely saw it. A body human-sized, moving like muscle, had decided gravity was merely a recommendation. The guard hit the wall. His rifle clanged away. Tan fired, but the shot went high as the figure twisted under it and drove an elbow into his wrist. The rifle spun from his hand. I stumbled backward, smacking into a pipe. Mirror 1 turned toward me. Up close, humans are worse. Not ugly, not monstrous. That would have been easier. He was simply too alive. Wet hair clung to his forehead. Fluid residue streaked his shoulders. Someone's blood, maybe his, marked one side of his neck. He wore torn restraint fabric wrapped around one forearm and had stolen a security undershirt from somewhere along the way. His chest rose and fell hard, but his eyes, those eyes were clear, focused, terribly awake, and very, very angry. He could have broken Tan's throat. He did not. He could have taken my head off my shoulders. He did not. Instead, he grabbed the fallen rifle, looked at it once and crushed the firing assembly against the wall. Just folded it, because of course. Tell them, he said, staring at me. I did not want to hurt them. Then he vanished into the side vent before Tan even found his breath. Alarms erupted. Tan swore with professional creativity. The rear guard groaned on the floor. And I stood there, staring at the ruined rifle in Tan's hand, while my mind made the catastrophic decision to become curious. Back in the command lab, Commander Even was waiting for us with the restrained fury of a man who wants permission to punch an entire species. You had him, he said. Tan fired too soon, I replied. Tan rounded on me. He attacked first. He attacked after you aimed at his face. He is an escaped military clone. He is a terrified person inside your ducts. Ivan cut in. Enough. Varro watched from behind the command station. Senna stood beside him, pale and rigid. I stepped toward the schematic. He's not trying to kill anyone. If he wanted bodies, we'd have bodies. Ivan said, that can change. It can also stay the same if you stop chasing him like a cornered bomb. Senya spoke at last. He asked for the original source again. Before the breach, I looked at her. And after he escaped, he accessed a local terminal. Wait, he can use terminals? She gave me a tired stare. He can read. That wasn't the question. He is learning systems faster than our models predicted. Meaning yes. Yes. I put both hands on the table and leaned in. Then hear me carefully. He isn't just fleeing, he's searching. Varro nodded once. For what? For who he is. Nobody spoke. I hate being right in rooms full of important people. They act like you have brought mud onto the carpet. Even folded his arms. Then we control the search. Restrict terminal access. Flush the maintenance network with gas. Force him into an open corridor. Bad idea, I said immediately. Your opinion is not requested. And yet it remains available. He glared. I continued, because survival and self-preservation have never been intimate friends. Gas the ducts and you trigger panic. Panic a human and you get improvisation. Improvisation from this one will cost you half the station. Varro asked. Alternative. I looked at the schematic, then at the scattered incident reports, then at the broken chamber footage frozen on one side display. He asked if he was alive. You never answered him. Then you treated him like a containment failure instead of a conscious being. So do the opposite. Sina frowned. Speak plainly. Talk to him. Even laughed once, harsh and humorless. Negotiation. Yes, with an unstable clone, with a person who has shown restraint under fear, tactical avoidance instead of slaughter, and deliberate tool selection. That is not mindless violence, that is judgment. Ivan said. He broke through armored glass. I shrugged. Humans are rude when upset. Varro's gaze sharpened. If we open a channel, why would he trust us? He won't. Then why try? Because he might trust me. That surprised even me. The room went still. Cinta said, why you? I thought of the shaft, the question, my answer. Because I had not called him a thing. Because I had not lied quickly enough to be useless. Because sometimes trust begins with two frightened beings noticing that everyone else in the room is making it worse. Because, I said, I told him the truth, or at least the part I had. That's already more than he got from any of you. Varro considered that, or even did not like it. Which, again, supported my confidence. No weapons, Varro said. Controlled transmission only. Leo attempts contact from Maintenance Hub C. Security remains hidden but ready. Hidden, Ivan said. Yes, Varro replied, hidden. If he sees rifles, we lose the chance. Ivan's jaw clenched hard enough to crack dense fruit. Senna looked at me. If he reaches you physically, he can kill you. I gave her my brightest smile. Thank you. That was almost concern. Maintenance Hub C was a cramped service node between power distribution and waste reclamation. In other words, beautiful, real walls. Honest grease. A folding stool that had seen violence. My kind of room. They set a comm transmitter on the workbench and withdrew behind sealed partitions with sensor feeds and sedation teams. I was alone, except for the cameras, the microphones, and the delicious certainty that at least 12 professionals were about to judge my every word while contributing nothing. I keyed the maintenance channel. Hello, I said. Nothing. I waited. I know you can hear station comms. Also, frankly, If you are half as clever as they say, you are probably already inside 3 of our maintenance feeds and 1 vending unit. A crackle. Then his voice, from somewhere in the ceiling speaker above me. The vending unit insulted me first. I sat back slowly. Good. Then we are speaking to a person of standards. A pause. You are alone? He asked. Define alone. Are there armed teams nearby? Yes. That got another pause. Thank you for answering. I'm trying a new policy. Honesty. Selective survival. He made that almost laugh sound again. It was unsettling how quickly a room full of dread can become a room full of tension with a joke in it. What do they call you? I asked. They call me Mirror 1. That's not a name, that's a filing error. Silence. Then quieter. I know. I leaned forward. Elbows on knees. Do you want one? A name? Yes. Another long silence. When he finally spoke, the voice had changed. Less iron, more uncertainty. Do beings choose their own? Sometimes someone gives you one. Sometimes you earn one. Sometimes you hate the one you are given for 20 years, and then it grows on you out of spite. He asked, What does Leo mean? I blinked. That is a rude question. It means my parents liked short words. Did they want you? I looked at the ceiling speaker for a very long moment. Behind the walls, the station hummed. Somewhere far above, alarms pulsed in muted cycles. Somewhere behind glass, brilliant people with disastrous judgment watched me talk to the impossible. Yes, I said at last. I think so, in their own clumsy way. He did not answer. So I asked, softly, Did anyone ever tell you they wanted you? The silence that followed was so total I could hear my own pulse. Then, very carefully, he said, No, there it was. The core wound. Not the restraints. Not the rifles. Not the chase. Habathought, no. I closed my eyes for half a second. They should have, I said. From the hidden observation room, somebody shifted sharply. Maybe Senna. Maybe Vero. Maybe the sound of a guilty conscience trying to exit through an air vent. The speaker crackled. Why did they make me? I could have lied. Should have perhaps if I had been clever in the approved institutional sense. But I have lived long enough around machinery to know the difference between a cracked pipe and a pressure line about to explode. Truth, at the right time, is not mercy, it is maintenance. They wanted to understand humans, I said, and because people with enough funding become convinced curiosity is the same thing as permission. He was quiet. Then was the original, like me? Good question. Terrible question. The kind that opens entire universes and then charges admission. I don't know, I admitted. But I know this. You moved through armed teams without killing them. You could have. You didn't. That tells me something. What? That whatever they copied, it did not erase choice. The speaker went silent again. Then every light in Hub C died. I stood so fast the stool fell over. Emergency red snapped on a breath later, bathing the room in blood-colored warning glow. In my earpiece voices erupted. Power cut in lower maintenance. Signal ghost on 3 feeds. Thermal contact moving toward Hub C. Wonderful. Of course he was coming here. Why merely hold an existential conversation through a speaker when you can escalate it into personal jeopardy? Leo, Vero's voice hissed through my earpiece, hold position. I touched the comm bead. You say that as if I have options. Something scraped in the vent behind me. I turned slowly. The panel above the waste filter shifted, then dropped. He landed without a sound. That alone was offensive. Creatures with that much mass should make noise. It is only fair. Mirror 1 straightened in the red light. He looked less like an escaped experiment now, and more like a soldier who had crawled through hell, found it understaffed, and decided to keep moving. He had secured a utility jacket from somewhere. One sleeve was torn. His right hand was bleeding. His eyes never stopped moving. You told them I might trust you, he said. Well, so much for hidden observers. Apparently he had ears too. I may have exaggerated my charm. Did you? I'm speaking to you alive. That's encouraging. He stepped closer. My body considered fainting. My pride vetoed it. I found records, he said. Fragments, sealed reports, Haron gate, casualty lists, human command structure, a name missing from one archive, removed from another, cross-tagged under restricted military burial. His gaze fixed on me. Aaron Vale. Who was he? And there it was, not just a source. A man. The original man. Before I could answer, the far wall burst inward. Security foam exploded into the hub. Two armored officers rushed through the breach, rifles up, Commander Ivan behind them with the kind of expression that has personally outlawed patience. "No!" I shouted. Mirror 1 moved first. Of course he did. He grabbed the overturned stool and hurled it into the lead rifle. The shot went into the ceiling, sparks rained down. He drove into the second officer with terrifying speed, hit the foam release canister on the officer's belt, and filled half the room in expanding white gel. Ivan fired a shock net. Mirror 1 caught one edge midair, twisted, and sent it flaring into the wall grid. The red lights died completely. Darkness, real darkness, thick, loud, full of struggling bodies and curses and the wet hiss of foam expanding across metal. Something seized my collar and yanked me sideways just as a rifle butt smashed the workbench where my head had been. I hit the floor hard. A hand clamped over my mouth. Mirror 1's voice came close to my ear, low and urgent. "If you yell, they will shoot through you." A surprisingly motivating argument. He dragged me through the open vent. I did not enjoy that. I did not consent to that. And yet there I was, hauled headfirst into the guts of Helix by the single most dangerous being on the station, while behind us Commander Ivan screamed enough profanity to power auxiliary systems. We crawled fast through the black ducts, down one incline, up another, through a fan housing he had somehow disabled, then into a maintenance cavity above thermal storage. Only there did he release me. I lay on my back, gasping. He crouched in the dark, listening. Far below, alarms spread through the station in rising waves. I finally managed. "This is a—" He looked down at me. Then absurdly, he said, "The vending unit was still worse." I laughed. Could not help it. Flat on my back, covered in dust, abducted by a human clone, possibly 2 minutes from death, and I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. He watched me as if I were unstable. Fair. When I stopped, I pushed myself upright. For the record, I did tell them not to storm the room. "I know. You heard. I hear a lot."
"Yes, I am beginning to hate that."
He settled against the bulkhead, every line of him alert even while still. "Answer the question. About Aaron Vale. Okusu. How is Alsdudley doodled night? Coming of tan ertnuld. Stratum of re." I studied him in the dim emergency glow seeping through grill slats from the corridor below. He wanted identity, origin, anchor, something to stand on besides panic. And now I had to decide whether giving it to him would save the station or help him tear it apart. "I don't know enough," I said carefully, "but I can find out." His jaw tightened. No more partial truths. That was not a partial truth. That was me admitting the limits of my security clearance and my social standing. You joke when you are afraid. You noticed. You talk when you are afraid too. That is less a reaction and more a lifestyle. For the first time fully he smiled. Not big, not warm, not safe, but real. It changed his whole face, and somehow that was more unsettling than the violence. "I need the rest," he said. "If they made me from him, I need to know who he was." I nodded once. "Then we get the rest." "We?" Ah, there it was. The dangerous little word. "Yes," I said, before wisdom could intervene. "We." Below us, security teams thundered past in the corridor. Mirror 1 did not even glance down. "What happens?" he asked. "If I do not like what I learn?" I met his eyes. No jokes. No deflection. "That," I said quietly, "is the part everyone on this station should be terrified of." He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Human custom. I knew it from diplomatic briefings. A trust gesture, or a challenge, or a promise. Humans loved giving one motion 6 meanings and then acting shocked when wars started. I took it anyway. His grip was warm, strong, controlled. "I won't be called Mirror 1, he said. "No," I agreed. "You won't." "What then?" I thought of the original name in the archive. Aaron Vale, Emma Rossello. Not his. Not exactly. Close, but not his. "You found your way through a station built to hide things," I said. "You kept your mind when everyone around you lost theirs. You stepped out of a chamber and refused the name they gave you." He waited. "Vale," I said, "if you want it." He repeated it once, under his breath, testing the shape. "Valley." Then he looked at me, and for one brief, impossible second, the hunted thing was gone. In its place sat a man in the dark, naming himself while alarms screamed through metal walls. "All right, Lio," he said, "let's find out why they made me." And below us, throughout Station Helix, every locked door began to cycle open. All at once, not by command, by breach. Every security panel on the lower decks flashed red, every monitor in the corridor lit with the same recovered military seal. And in a voice so calm it froze the air in my lungs, the station archive announced, "Restricted identity confirmation. Source template recognized. Command Officer Aaron Vale. Status classification, active." Vale turned toward the sound. I stared at him. Then at the vents. Then at the lights. Then back at him. "Well," I said weakly, "that seems very bad." He did not answer. His face had gone still in a way I had already learned to fear. Below us, Commander Even roared for lockdown. Above us, sealed systems continued unlocking. Somewhere inside Helix, something had recognized the man they used to build him. Not tissue, not probability. Him. And in that moment, crouched in the dark beside a human who should not exist, I understood the most important detail of all. Project Mirror had not accidentally cloned a body. It had brought back someone the station itself remembered. And whatever Aaron Vale had been in life, the galaxy had not finished being afraid of him. If you have never watched a dead man override station security, let me spare you the anticipation. It is bad for morale. The maintenance cavity shook with the sound of locks cycling open across 3 decks. Below us, corridor lights strobed red, white, like Helix had developed a migraine and decided to share it with the rest of us. Security teams shouted over one another. Command channels overlapped. Somewhere in the distance, something metal hit something expensive, which is the universal station hymn for "This is now everyone's problem." Vale stayed perfectly still. That was worse than if he had panicked. I have met panicked people. I understand panicked people. They flail, they shout, they make demands no one can satisfy, and with luck, they tire themselves out. Stillness is different. Stillness means the mind has gone somewhere sharp. The archive voice repeated, "Restricted identity confirmation. Source template recognized. Command Officer Aaron Vale. Status classification, active." Then it cut off. "No," Vale said softly. I turned to him. "No, that seems accurate enough from where I'm sitting." His eyes did not leave the grill below. "No, that isn't possible." "Yes, good, wonderful. We have both reached the same conclusion with completely different emotional reactions." He finally looked at me. "I'm not him." "Of course you are not." The words came easily. Too easily, maybe, but they were true. "You are not a copied shirt," I said. "You are not a reshelved file. You are you. The station can mislabel whatever it likes." He studied me for a second that felt much longer. Then he asked, "Do you actually believe that?" I answered before the part of me that survives on caution could interfere. "Yes, I meant it." Also, I was sitting in a vent beside a human built from dead military tissue while armed squads flooded the decks below. It felt like the sort of moment where hypocrisy would be rude. Valley exhaled through his nose. "Good." "Good?" "If you had said otherwise, I would have left you here." I swallowed. "I appreciate the candor." Down in the corridor, Commander Even's voice barked through a portable amplifier. "All teams, listen carefully. Subject is attempting system manipulation. Priority is containment. Live capture remains authorized. Use full sedative response if engaged." I looked at Vale. He's really committed to the whole make it worse strategy. Vale crouched by the access grill and peered through. "He's frightened." "Yes. He hides it badly." "Yes. He reminds me of someone." I blinked. "Who?" Vale frowned, like the answer sat just beyond reach. "I don't know." That hit me harder than I expected. Not memory, exactly, but shape, instinct, echo. The scientists had promised no preserved memory, and maybe they had been telling the truth the way people in research departments often do, which is to say, narrowly, legally, and without useful soul. Maybe there were no direct memories inside him, but pieces, reactions, familiarity without context. I would have bet my remaining pay cycles on it. A burst of static crackled in my earpiece. Apparently I still had one. Miraculous. "Leo," Varro said, low and urgent, "respond." Vale's head turned toward me. He had heard it, of course, because apparently the human sense of hearing is sponsored by witchcraft. I touched the earpiece. "Still alive. Location, complicated." "Leo, I'm in maintenance above Thermal Corridor 5 with the escaped bioethical nightmare, and somehow I am still the calmest person involved." Varro ignored the sarcasm with the cold discipline of a man who had spent many years around committees. "Can you keep him there?" Vale lifted one eyebrow. "No," I said. "He can hear you, by the way." A pause. Then Varro said, "Valley. That was smart. I will give Varro that. He adapted quickly once the ground beneath him started breaking. Vale did not answer. Barrow continued. The station archive breach was not ordered. Someone set command ghost keys into the human source file. We are trying to identify who. Vale spoke at last. How many people knew the source name? Few. Senna? Another pause. Yes. Vale glanced at me. I did not care for that glance. It contained too much thought. You think she hid something? I said. I think everyone here hid something, he replied. Frankly, fair. Varro said, if you come in peacefully, we can clarify the file breach. Vale gave a small, humorless smile. Your people said similar things before the chamber restraints. Varro did not answer. That silence said more than any speech would have. Vale stood. We are moving. I nearly laughed from pure disbelief. We? He looked down at me. You said we. Yes, and that was before the station started recognizing dead officers. We still need answers. We do. I would just prefer answers that do not involve me being hunted through my own air ducts. You know a better route. I sighed, got to my feet, and dusted off my sleeves. Tragically, yes. We moved through the maintenance lattice toward the archival spine beneath command. That alone should tell you how unstable my life had become. A standard citizen of Helix does not go toward command during a station-wide security event. A standard citizen goes the opposite direction while filling out a complaint form. Yet there I was, crawling after a self-named human through a cable run, trying to plan treason with good posture. You know, I muttered as we squeezed through a condenser crawl. Most people have nervous breakdowns in private. Vale was ahead of me, shifting a mesh plate loose with fingers that could probably open sealed cargo by persuasion alone. Are you having one? I'm considering it. I like to schedule these things. He slid through into the next duct and offered a hand back. I took it, because gravity and pride were no longer on speaking terms. As he pulled me through, I caught a better look at him in the flashing emergency lights. He had changed in only a few hours. Not physically. The body was the same, but the expression was different. Less raw confusion, more direction. He looked like someone who had found the shape of the blade meant for him and was deciding where to point it. That is not a comforting look. We dropped into an access niche above Archive Relay 3. Through the floor grill below, I could see two techs at a terminal trying very hard to pretend the station was not unraveling around them. I can disable that panel, I whispered. Vale frowned. Quietly? No, but with enthusiasm. He almost smiled. I popped the maintenance latch beside the relay, yanked the emergency purge handle, and sent a burst of coolant foam roaring through the side vent. The two techs yelped and dove away from the console as white vapor filled the room. Vale removed the grill, dropped soundlessly, crossed the floor in 3 strides and keyed the archive terminal before either tech fully understood they had a person in the room and not an unusually determined refrigeration failure. I came down less elegantly. One of the techs stared at me. Leo? Yes, hello, workplace developments. The other pointed at Vale. That's him. Yes, I said, good eye. Vala's fingers moved across the terminal far too quickly for someone who had been technically alive for less than a day. Archive menus spilled open, sealed branches peeling back one after another. Restricted military file, source handling authorization, genetic recovery permit, cross-jurisdiction defense seal, special order countersign, and then one line in bright red, Project Mirror initiated under Directive Janus. Primary authorization, Director Senna Oris, secondary buried clearance, Aaron Vale, Human Defense Command. Vale went rigid. I stepped closer. What is Directive Janus? Before he could answer, the archive supplied it helpfully on screen. Directive Janus. In the event of catastrophic strategic loss, preserved combat templates may be reconstructed under emergency authority if direct command restoration is required. I read it twice, then a third time, because the first 2 had offended my literacy. Combat templates, I said softly. They weren't studying humans. Vale's face went blank in a way that chilled me far more than anger would have. No, the terminal expanded another file branch. Operational notes, sealed after-action remarks, Haron Gate casualty redactions. And there, in plain text at last, was the name. Commander Aaron Vale, Human Defense Command. Status at Haron Gate, missing after breach action. Body recovery incomplete. Biological remains secured under Janus contingency. My skin went cold. Missing, I whispered, not confirmed dead. Valley stared at the screen. Then why classify him as a casualty? A voice answered from the doorway. Because the truth was worse. Senna stood there with a compact pulse sidearm leveled in both hands. Of course she did. There are many ways a scientist can enter a dramatic scene. Breathless with guilt, tearful with regret, full of trembling apology. Senna chose armed and exhausted, which, in fairness, fit her better. The two techs made small, frightened sounds and flattened themselves behind a console. I lifted both hands. You know, when people say they want transparency from research leadership, this is not what they mean. Move away from the terminal, Senna said. Val did not move. Why did the archive recognize me? Because I tied your genome to the source command file, she replied. I stared at her. You what? She did not take her eyes off Val. I needed full neural stability. Partial tissue reconstruction was not enough. Genus templates require command resonance markers for identity continuity. Every word she said felt like a crime wearing polished shoes. Vale asked, very quietly, you weren't cloning a human. You were trying to restore a commander. Senna's jaw tightened. I was trying to save lives. That explanation is always a bad sign, I muttered. She ignored me. Haron gate nearly broke the front. Human command records around Vale were inconsistent. Tactical reports credited him with impossible field reversals, irregular civilian extractions, and direct refusal of retreat orders. After the battle, half the defense network treated him like a hero. The other half buried the file. Why? I asked. Senna finally looked at me. Because he did something no allied command structure could explain. That clears up nothing. She looked back at Vale. He turned an entire defeat into a strategic trap. Vale's eyes narrowed. How? Senna swallowed once. By sacrificing his own fleet position, going silent, and luring the enemy through Haron Gate's inner corridor where civilian evacuation traffic had already been rerouted. He vanished with the flagship. The enemy followed. Minutes later, every gravity mine in the corridor detonated. I blinked. He mined his own retreat path. He had no retreat path left. Senna snapped. He built one out of the enemy. Even Vale looked unsettled by that. I said, how many died? Senna's voice dropped. Enough that Allied command called it victory in public and abomination in private. That explained a great many things. Heroes are easy when they die in approved shapes. Less easy when they win in ways that keep diplomats awake for decades. Vale stepped toward her. The sidearm rose half a finger. Stop, Senna said. He did. Not from fear, from control. Why me? He asked. You were the most intact Janus-compatible human source in range. Your cognition held in the pattern lattice better than any other template. The others degraded. You didn't. You say that like it was a compliment. It was survival. No, he said. It was theft. The room went very still. Senna's weapon did not waver, but her face changed. Not much. Just enough. Guilt. Finally. Late, badly dressed, but present. I know, she said. Now what that surprised me so much, I almost admired her again. Almost. Then why continue? Vale asked. Because the frontier is breaking, she replied. Because colonies disappear. Because pirate fleets are suddenly using doctrine they should not understand. Because command councils stall until worlds burn. Because every species in this alliance keeps saying humanity is too unstable to place at the center of strategy. And yet every time human officers are gone, the casualty lines get longer. She inhaled sharply. I wanted the one they buried. The one who won when no one else could. Vale stared at her. I'm not your weapon. I know that now. Oh, excellent, I said, a little late for a revelation, but excellent. Simp's eyes cut to me. Leo, be quiet. No. I stepped forward, just enough to make her split attention between me and Vale. It was probably stupid. By then stupidity and initiative had formed a merger. You made a person in a cage because you wanted an answer to your strategic anxieties. I said, you do not get to discover ethics only after he starts asking questions. Senna's mouth tightened. You think I don't understand that? I think you understand it perfectly and dislike the feeling. A harsh alarm interrupted us. Then Varro's voice thundered over the archive speakers. All personnel unauthorized dock release in progress. Repeat, dock release in progress. Lower hangar seals compromised. I spun toward the side display. Security feeds lit up. In dock ring 2, cargo clamps were disengaging all on their own. External shutters were lifting. I felt my stomach drop. Who's doing that? I asked. Senna's face drained of color. Not us. Vale looked at the archive terminal. The ghost command keys were still running. Something on Helix had seen his recognition event and now had other plans. A new file burst open on screen without input. Janus failsafe. Upon command restoration, transfer asset to extraction point. Escort authority, active. Threat suppression, authorized. I said the first thing that entered my mind, which was, "Oh, that is impressively horrible." The station lights flickered again. Security channels erupted in screams. Not combat screams. Vacuum warnings. Dock Ring 2 had opened to space. Vale moved instantly, stepping to the terminal, ripping a panel free and yanking the relay core out with his bare hand. Sparks blew across the console. The Janus file died. Too late. On the feed, I watched 2 maintenance drones in the hangar snap apart as decompression took them. Emergency bulkheads slammed down one by one. Senna whispered. There was an extraction protocol. I rounded on her. You built a human command clone with a hidden automatic retrieval order and forgot to mention that. I did not build the failsafe, but you tied him to it. Her silence was answer enough. Valp looked from the dead relay to the hangar feed. Someone expected me to wake up. Yes, I said, and apparently they were even less sane than the current room. He turned to Senna. Who else had Janus access? Only one name above mine. Human Liaison Authority. Off book. Archived under military diplomatic seal. Mime Stame, Refik of Arcieda Struckable. Mime Stame. Senna hesitated. Val took one step toward her. Admiral Rake, she said, retired, officially, missing, unofficially. That name meant nothing to me. Vale's reaction said it should have. His face turned to iron. He was there. At Haron Gate, I asked. Vale did not look at me. I think so. Think so, not remember. Not clearly, but something in him had shifted again. Fragments, instinct, pattern. I hated Janus more every second. Commander Even stormed into the archive room with 6 armed officers and the expression of a man whose patience had now become an extinct resource. For one beautiful second, nobody moved. He took in the scene. Senna with a drawn weapon. Me in the middle of yet another terrible career choice. Vale at the gutted terminal. The 2 terrified techs. The docking feed. The dead relay. Then Ivan said, with deadly calm, I have decided I dislike everyone here. Good. I said, that means you are paying attention. His officers raised rifles. Vale shifted his weight. I raised both hands fast. No, absolutely not. We are done escalating for the next 5 seconds. Ivan ignored me, which he had elevated to an art form by then. Subject, surrender. Vale said, there's an extraction protocol trying to pull me off station. I know. That gave even me pause. You know? Evan's gaze flicked to the dead terminal. We caught traces of Ghost Command logic the moment archive recognition triggered. Dock Ring 2 was the first move. Dock Ring 6 is next. Center stared. Why didn't you report that? Because until 60 seconds ago I was not sure whether the threat was the subject or the people who made him. That, from Ivan, was practically poetry. Vale asked. And now? Now Ivan said, I believe someone wants him alive for reasons worse than our own. I rubbed my temples. Wonderful. We have upgraded from internal disaster to external conspiracy. My favorite. One of Ivan's officers spoke into a wristcom, then blanched. Commander. Unmarked shuttle signature just pinged outer dark on passive approach. No transponder. Vectoring toward Dock 6. There it was, the hidden hand. Because of course secret military retrieval plans are never content with merely ruining ethics. They need a dramatic entrance too. Ivan barked orders. Seal Dock 6. Deploy magnetic anchors. Shoot the shuttle if it forces approach. Rules of engagement. An officer asked. Ivan's answer came instantly. I will write them later. That, I admit, earned my respect. Val looked at the feed, then at the room, then at me. We need to move, he said. Ivan's rifle stayed up. No. We hold here. Vale shook his head. If this Admiral Rake wants me extracted, he won't rely on one dock. He will hit power, seals, local comms, anything that splits response. Senna said, he's right. Ivan gave her a look that suggested this agreement pained him physically. I said, the fastest route to Dock 6 without crossing open corridors is the maintenance spine behind archive storage. All eyes turned to me. Yes, I said, annoyed. I continue to be useful. Please contain your astonishment. Even made the decision in one clipped breath. Fine. Leo leads. Subject stays in sight. Any hostile action and I end it. Vale met his stare. Try. Wonderful. Terrific. Excellent teamwork already. We moved in a fast, ugly column through the service spine. Ivan and 2 officers front, Vale and I in the center. Senna behind us with a sidearm she looked increasingly unfit to hold. The rest covered the rear. As we ran, I asked Vale quietly, "Do you actually remember Haron Gate?" He was silent for several strides. Then, "No, not as events, more like pressure behind the eyes, shapes, reactions, names that feel heavy. Rake." His mouth tightened, like acid, not comforting. We reached a vertical maintenance shaft that ran down to Dock Ring 6. Through the inspection slots I could see security teams below setting portable barricades across the hangar doors. Then the whole shaft shuddered. The lights died. Emergency power failed to kick in. Total black. I hate total black. Over the comms came a burst of static, then a calm human voice I had never heard before. "Commander Vale, transfer is authorized. Resistance is unnecessary." Every hair on my arms lifted. Vale froze. The voice continued, smooth as polished poison. "You were preserved for a reason. Do not waste more lives proving the old reports accurate." Ivan snarled into his comm, "Trace that signal." No response. Because there was no station signal to trace. The voice came through every dead speaker anyway. Cinta whispered, "Reich." Val's breathing changed. Not louder, sharper. The voice spoke again. "I know you can hear me, Vale. You followed orders once. You can do it again." Val said into the dark, "I followed judgment." A soft laugh answered from nowhere. "That is exactly what made you useful." Then the shaft wall blew inward. Flash charges, concussive wave, shards of paneling, smoke. A boarding team hit us from the lateral duct in blackout visors and mag boots, moving with brutal precision. Human-sized, human-fast, not random mercenaries either. Clean entry, tight arcs, non-lethal shock rods in one hand, live weapons in the other. This was planned around Vale. I hit the wall and lost my breath. Ivan's front officers opened fire. Blue pulse flashes tore the dark apart. One boarder went down. Another vaulted over the body and smashed into Ivan with a force that would have folded a normal person in half. Vale moved. I have spent most of my life around machines, which means I know the difference between speed and efficiency. Many things are fast. Very few are efficient. Vale in a fight was efficient. No wasted motion, no show, no roar. He hit one boarder in the throat, took the shock rod before it fell, pivoted, broke another one's wrist, drove the rod into a third attacker's chest pack, and sent the man convulsing into the shaft ladder. Someone fired at him from below. He used the falling body as cover. I would like to note for the record that this is not normal behavior. It should not be achievable by anything that eats sandwiches. A boarder lunged at me, maybe because I was the only one in the shaft who looked plausibly fragile. Rude but understandable. I swung my utility cutter into his helmet visor. It did not do much structurally, but it did fog the shield with coolant grease, and when he reflexively lifted a hand to clear it, I kicked his knee sideways with all the elegance of a panicked mule. He collapsed into Ivan's officer, and both went down the ladder in a tangle of highly educational swearing. Cinna fired twice from behind me. One shot missed. The second caught a boarder's shoulder and spun him into the shaft rail. Not bad for a woman currently being pursued by the consequences of her own career. Vale grabbed my sleeve and hauled me past a falling section of conduit just before it crushed my foot. "You still alive?" he shouted. Unfortunately, yes.
Hood.
It was the first time anyone had sounded genuinely pleased by that all day. We dropped the last 6 meters into Dock Ring 6, amid smoke and flashing emergency strobes. The outer hangar door was half open. Beyond it, a matte black shuttle hovered in the docking throat. Clamps extended like a metal insect trying to feed. Security teams fired grapples into the deck to brace against pressure loss. The shuttle returned fire with precise bursts aimed to disable barriers, not vaporize the dock. Again, retrieval, not massacre. That somehow made it uglier. On the shuttle hull, faint under scorch marks, I saw an old human military insignia scratched away but not fully erased. Vale saw it too. His face changed. Not fear, recognition. Hard, clean, dangerous recognition. "Rake," he said. The shuttle side hatch opened. A man stepped out in mag boots and a dark command coat clipped close to the body. Human, older, silver at the temples, scar along one cheek, calm in the middle of decompression warnings and gunfire, which told me everything I needed to know about his internal flaws. He did not shout. He simply stood there and said, "Val." The sound of that name in his voice did more damage than the boarding charges had. Vale went still. Admiral Rake looked at him the way some men look at a city they once owned. "You have no idea what they woke," Rack said to the room at large. "But I do. Send him over and no one else needs to bleed." Ulvin fired first. "Good man." Rike dropped aside with terrifying speed for someone his age, and the shot slammed sparks off the shuttle frame. His boarding team answered with disciplined cover fire. The dock became hell with paperwork. I flattened behind a cargo loader with Senna gasping beside me. Ivan dragged one wounded officer to cover while shouting anchor commands. Vale stood in the open for half a second too long, staring at Rake like a man trying to remember whether he hated someone enough to kill them. Then a round screamed off the deck beside him, and memory or instinct snapped into action. He ran toward the shuttle. My heart nearly stopped. Not because I thought he had switched sides, because I realized he was doing something much worse for my blood pressure. He intended to take the shuttle. Of course he did. Why solve a situation in a way that preserves my remaining life expectancy? "Val!" I shouted. He didn't look back. He vaulted a low barrier, rolled under a burst of covering fire, grabbed a dropped mag hook from one of the boarders, and flung it upward into the shuttle hatch frame. Then he used the recoil line to sling himself across an open patch of deck that 3 trained security teams had already declared impassable. Humans. Rake saw it too late. Vale crashed into him at the hatch. Both men vanished inside in a blur of fists and metal. Ivan barked, "No one fires. Breach risk." Which meant, naturally, I was the only idiot free enough to move. I looked at the half-open hangar, the shaking deck, the anchor lines, the shuttle trying to break free, and the 2 human madmen fighting inside it. Then I did what any rational sanitation officer would do under impossible conditions. I ran directly at the disaster. Behind me I heard Ivan shout my name with such venom it almost gave me confidence. The mag hook line was still swinging. I grabbed it, kicked off the loader, and slammed into the shuttle threshold hard enough to see new colors. Inside, the fight was close and vicious. Rake was not as strong as Vale, but he was skilled in the ugly, efficient way of people who have survived too long by expecting betrayal. He had a blade in one hand and a compact pulse pistol somewhere under Vale's grip. Vale had him by the collar against the inner bulkhead. They traded blows at ranges where every movement mattered. I threw myself at the interior control panel, because I knew something about shuttles and because I deeply resented vacuum. The release clamps were cycling. The hatch warning screamed at me in 3 languages. I slammed the manual override. Nothing. "Of course," I muttered. "Why would one emergency lever ever actually work?" Behind me, Rake hissed, "You think they made you for mercy?" Vale hit him hard enough to dent the bulkhead.
Odd.
Reich laughed through blood. "There you are." I turned. "That is a very bad sentence." Rake's eyes flicked to me for the first time. Cold. Assessing. Disgustingly calm. "Alien," he said, like I was furniture that had developed opinions. "Yes. Hello. I also hate you." He kicked Vale off balance, rolled, and came up with the pulse pistol. The muzzle pointed at me. Time, as people say, slowed. Personally, I think time remained its usual rude self while my brain simply panicked with better detail. Then Vale hit Rake from the side. The shot blew the control panel instead of my chest. Sparks exploded. The shuttle lurched. Outside, anchor lines screamed. I lost my footing and slammed into the hatch frame just as the vessel pulled half free of the dock. Below us was open space. I do not recommend looking at open space while hanging from a damaged shuttle by one arm. It encourages personal reflection. Rake and Vale crashed into the opposite bulkhead. The pistol skidded. I snatched it. That was the first terrible idea. The second was realizing I did not know the safety settings. The third was staying anyway. Rake saw the gun in my hand and almost smiled. "Shoot him." I laughed in disbelief. "You truly do not understand how little I belong in this scene." "He isn't your friend," Rake said. Valley drove a knee into his ribs. Rakey grunted, then kept talking anyway, because apparently his species came with optional self-preservation. He was built for command violence, built from a man who sent fleets to die and called it necessary. Vale hit him again. I shouted, "Could you both stop reshaping the shuttle for 1 second?" Neither listened. Naturally, Rake finally got one hand on Vale's throat and snarled, "All smooth command gone now. You did what had to be done at Haron Gate. You know you did." Vale's whole body locked. That was it. The key. The trigger. The old wound. Memory did not return in some grand dramatic flood. I could see that even from where I clung to the hatch frame with a dead control panel smoking beside me. It came in fragments. Pain. Noise. decision, the kind of recall that lands like impact, not revelation. Val froze for one fraction too long. Rake drove him backward into the jump seat rack, seized the dropped blade and raised it. I fired the pistol, completely by instinct, mostly by terror, slightly by anger. The pulse burst hit the ceiling rail 2 handspans above Rocket's head and blew molten insulation across his shoulder. He roared and jerked sideways. Veli did not waste the opening. He caught Rake's knife wrist, twisted, disarmed him, and slammed him against the inner hatchlock so hard the older man's head snapped back with a sound I felt in my own teeth. Then Vale held the blade at Rake's throat and stopped. Outside the shuttle, the last magnetic anchor line snapped. We drifted fully free of the dock. The hatch began to close automatically. The hangar vanished behind ceiling metal. Now it was just the 3 of us inside a damaged shuttle tumbling slowly off Helix with half the controls dead and every problem somehow worse than before. Wonderful. I slid down to the deck and clutched the pistol like it had personally offended me. Vale kept the blade at Rake's throat. His chest rose and fell hard. Blood ran from his lip. Rake, to his great credit or terrible judgment, smiled through his own blood. "You remember," he whispered. Vale's face had gone distant, like he was seeing 2 rooms at once. "Not enough," he said. "Enough to know I was right." "No," Vale said, and the words shook. "Enough to know you were there." Rake's smile faded. "Out good." I pushed myself upright and found the emergency stabilization panel near the rear lockers. Half functional, less mediocre engineering. The shuttle was still under thrust, vectoring away from Helix and toward the black side of the planet below. "Not ideal," I shouted back into the cabin. "I hate to interrupt the homicidal reunion, but unless one of you wants to explain atmospheric re-entry to a dead propulsion core, I suggest priorities." Vale did not look at me. "Can you fly this?" "Define fly." Rake laughed once. "We are doomed." I pointed the pistol at him. "I have grown to dislike your tone." Vale finally spoke to me without taking his eyes off the Admiral. "Can you stabilize us?" "Yes, maybe, probably, in the broad philosophical sense." "Do it." So I did what maintenance crews have done across the galaxy since the first idiot put a combustion system next to a chair and called it travel. I opened the emergency service trunk, ignored 3 angry warning labels, crossed 2 damaged relay feeds with a thermal fuse strip, kicked the auxiliary thrust governor until it stopped emitting sparks, and used a pressure wrench as a circuit bridge. Beautiful work. Reckless. Possibly illegal in 14 systems. The shuttle steadied. I allowed myself half a breath of triumph. Then the console lit with a proximity alert. 3 interceptors launching from Helix. Of course, the Ivan was coming. For one glorious second I imagined him personally piloting all 3 just to improve the quality of his rage. The comm panel crackled. "Unknown shuttle, cut thrust and prepare for forced docking." "Ivan, naturally." Rake laughed again, softer this time. "He will destroy us before he lets me take you." Vale's blade pressed lightly against his throat. "Then perhaps you should speak quickly." Rake's eyes stayed on him. Haron Gate was a trap from both sides. The enemy knew the civilian corridor. Someone sold the evacuation routes. Your command froze. You moved without authorization. "Because we had no time," Vale said. "Yes, pieces were coming back." I could hear it in his voice. "Not all of it. Enough." Rake continued. "You told them to abandon the fleet line and save the transports. The Council refused. Too risky. Too costly, so you cut your own command channel and did it anyway." Vale's jaw tightened. Rake spoke like a man reciting a liturgy he had repeated in the dark for years. "You mined the corridor, drew the enemy in, burned your flagship to keep the signal alive. The transports got clear. The enemy broke. The Council survived because you disobeyed them." He leaned into the blade just enough to show he no longer cared very much about pain. "And when the numbers came in, they buried you. Publicly, a fallen hero. Privately, an embarrassment. A human officer who saved the frontier by proving command was too slow to deserve obedience." I looked at Vale. He was remembering now. Not every detail, but the center of it. The unbearable center. "You knew," Vale said. Rake smiled without warmth. "I helped you arm the mines." "Well, that landed like a reactor breach." Vale's eyes hardened. "Then why did you let them bury it?" For the first time Reiki looked old. "Because I was loyal to the wrong machine," he said. "And because by the time I understood what they meant to do, your body was gone and the story had calcified." No one spoke for a beat. Then I said, because apparently I was incapable of letting silence function properly. So let me summarize the excellent decisions of human command. You had a brilliant officer. He saved civilians by ignoring slow authority. Leadership panicked at the precedent, declared him dead in the neatest possible way, hid the method, stored the remains under a secret restoration directive. Then years later, our local disaster scientists decided to grow him back in a tube. Have I missed anything? Rick looked at me. You are irritating. Thank you. The interceptor comm barked again. Unknown shuttle. Final warning. Val did not move the blade. Why extract me? Rake answered immediately. Because the frontier still needs you. Vale laughed once. It was not kind. No, he said, it needs people who aren't afraid of what saving lives looks like. Rocca's stare did not break. You could still command. I'm not him. Not entirely. That was the wrong thing to say. In one motion, Vale yanked Rake out of the command seat, slammed him face first onto the deck, and locked his arm behind his back hard enough to make the older man gasp. I am not your continuation, Vale said. I am what you made when you tried to steal one. I do not think I breathed during that sentence. Neither, I suspect, did the universe. The comm screamed again. Ivan was not going to wait much longer. I slapped the channel open. Commander, do not fire. Repeat, do not fire. We have the Admiral, also the human, also me, which matters to me a great deal. Ivan's voice came sharp and unbelieving. Lio?
Yes?
How are you on the shuttle? That is a very long story, and will require better refreshments. A pause, then grudgingly, report. I gave the short version, because even crisis has some mercy. Secret Janus retrieval, Admiral Rake, Haron Gate cover-up, Vale alive and armed but not currently murdering everyone, which remained our strongest selling point. When I finished, silence answered for one long second. Then Ivan said, bring them back. Rake laughed bitterly from the deck. And then what? Hand me to Alliance intelligence? Put him back in a cage? Vale's grip tightened. I looked at the viewport. Helix hung above us, huge and bright and absurdly fragile. One station, thousands of people, a command chain full of fear, pride, and habit. Same as any civilization, really, just more doors. I turned to Vale. He looked at me, and I knew what he was really asking, though neither of us said it aloud. If he went back, would they make him a prisoner, a weapon, a file, a myth, or a man? I answered with the only honest thing I had left. That depends, I said, on whether you walk back in as evidence or as a witness. Rake twisted enough to sneer. Idealism. From sanitation. Yes, I said, we deal with waste. We get opinions. Val's gaze held mine. Then he released Rake, took the pistol from my hand, ejected the power cell, and tossed both halves across the cabin. One choice. Then he took the blade, folded it closed, and set it on the deck. Second choice. Finally, he sat in the jump seat opposite the Admiral and looked straight ahead. Third choice. Take us in, he said. I have never respected anyone more than I respected him in that moment. Not because he forgave. He did not. Not because he trusted. He did not. Because he chose the harder path while fully understanding the cost. We docked under armed escort. Dock Ring 3 this time, sealed, braced, crowded with enough security to invade a minor moon. As the hatch opened, Commander Ivan stood at the front rank with armor scorched, one arm strapped and fury polished to a military shine. He saw me first. Explain, he said. I object to your tone. He looked past me to Rake, then to Vale. Then, to my profound satisfaction, Ivan made the tactical decision of a very intelligent man. He signaled his teams to take the Admiral, not Vale. Rumik straightened as they bound his hands. This changes nothing. Levin stepped close enough that only Rake and the nearest few of us could hear him. No, it changes who gets to speak first. That was, I will admit, excellent. Senna arrived minutes later, escorted by Varro and 3 internal investigators who had appeared from nowhere the way bureaucratic predators always do when blame ripens. She looked at Vale once, then lowered her eyes. I can testify, she said quietly, everything. Janus, the hidden extraction logic, Haron Gate files. Varro asked, why now? She answered without looking at anyone. Because he asked if he was alive, and I built an entire project around pretending the answer could wait. No one mocked her. Not even me. Some sentences earned silence. The next 12 hours were dreadful in the procedural sense. Statements, medical scans, seized files, emergency counsels, doc footage. archive dumps, intelligence pings, human diplomatic panic, alliance panic, private panic from everyone who had ever signed anything near Project Mirror. I gave my account 4 times and improved it each telling out of self-defense. They wanted to put Vale under secure observation. He refused. Ivan, to my lasting astonishment, sided with him. Observation, the commander said to the council, is the word that brought us here. That line will probably be quoted in some future tribunal, stripped of all the interesting swearing that came before and after. In the end, they compromised, because councils are living proof that no one gets exactly what they want unless they are armed or dead. Val was granted provisional personhood status pending interspecies legal review, which was the most bureaucratic way possible of saying, we admit this is a person, but we are frightened of the paperwork. He was also assigned guarded quarters. Not a cell. Quarters. That mattered too. Rake vanished into intelligence custody, still smiling in the maddening way of people who think history will apologize to them later. Senna was suspended, then retained as a witness, which irritated nearly everyone in satisfying proportion. Barrow spent the rest of the cycle looking like a man who had swallowed a live engine. And me? I went back to sanitation for 6 glorious hours before the universe remembered where I lived. It was late station night. Quiet, for once. I was under a recycler stack with both arms inside a clogged pressure manifold, enjoying the clean honesty of a problem that only involved sludge, when someone cleared their throat behind me. I banged my head on the pipe. Naturally, I slid out swearing and found Vale standing in the maintenance bay doorway wearing plain station clothes that fit him suspiciously well, as if somebody in provisioning had gotten overexcited about the measurements. You walk too quietly, I said. You say that every time. This is the 2nd time. Still accurate. He looked different in regular clothing, less like an incident report, more like a person trying out gravity in public. I wiped my hands on a rag. Should you be wandering around? Even assigned a shadow team. I peered around him. I see no shadow team. He nodded toward the ceiling vent. I stared. Oh, that is obnoxiously on brand. A faint metallic clunk from above suggested he was correct. What do you want? I asked. He glanced around the bay. You were serious. About what? That you clean things for a living. I looked at the manifold slime on my sleeves, then back at him. Vale, if this is a joke, it's cruel. He smiled. That smile was different now, still restrained, still edged, but less haunted by first panic. I came to thank you, he said. Well, that stopped me harder than any weapon had. No one likes hearing that, I muttered. It raises expectations. I'm serious. Yes, that is the problem. He stepped farther into the bay, eyes tracking the maze of pipes and access ladders and patched panels. This place makes more sense than command. That, I said, is the wisest statement ever spoken by a human. He leaned against the workbench. They told me the tribunal will take months. Years, if you are lucky. Is that your way of comforting people? No. My comforting style involves tea and lower standards. He was quiet for a second. Then I remembered more. I stopped fidgeting with the pressure wrench. How much? Enough. That was not reassuring. He looked at the floor as he spoke, as if the words had weight and he preferred dropping them close to the ground. I remember Haron Gate. Not every corridor, not every face, but the decision, the council delay, the transport columns trapped behind us, the enemy turning inward, Rake saying we still had 1 move left if we accepted what it would cost. He drew a breath. I remember giving the order. And he looked up at me, and I still would. There it was. The terrible human thing. Not innocence, not purity, not some sparkling heroic nonsense for soft propaganda reels. Judgment, the kind that carries blood and still stands upright under it. I leaned back against the opposite bench. That bothers you? Yes. Good. His brow shifted. Good. Yes. Because the day it doesn't bother you is the day I start carrying a bigger wrench. He laughed. An actual laugh this time. Brief, rough, surprised into being. A maintenance tech in the next bay dropped something loudly and fled. Sensible worker. Vale shook his head. You really think this can work? What? This station, this alliance, me in it. I considered lying kindly. Instead, I said, no. He stared. I shrugged. Not cleanly, not neatly, not in the way speeches like to promise, but working is not the same as being pretty. He thought about that. Ivan offered training access, he said. Ivan. Yes. I need time to process how insulting that is to my worldview. He said if I planned to remain aboard Helix, I should stop frightening his teams by accident. That sounds like affection from him. I believe it was. I nodded solemnly. You are learning the local dialect. He pushed off the bench and wandered to the open maintenance hatch. And you? What about me? You have been reassigned. My shoulders dropped. You heard about that? The station talks. The station gossips worse than wet wiring. He turned, waiting. I sighed. Yes, I have been promoted, allegedly, infrastructure liaison to internal review, which is bureaucratic language for the loud sanitation officer is now everybody's problem in meetings. Val's smile widened. Congratulations. Do not mock my suffering. I'm not. You are a little. Yes. I pointed at him. See? Human corruption already. That almost laugh again. We stood there in the hum of pipes and the faint smell of coolant and old metal, and for the first time since Project Mirror cracked open, the station felt less like a trap and more like a place where the next decision had not yet been ruined. Then the Baycom pinged. A new channel. External relay. Human diplomatic office. Sealed priority. I stared at it. Valet stared at it. Neither of us moved. Finally I said, well, that seems ominous. Very. The comm pinged again. I crossed the room and hit accept on speaker. A crisp voice said, Attention Station Helix. By authority of the Human Defense Accord, we request immediate conversation with the individual currently recognized under Janus template designation Aaron Vale. I looked at Vale. He looked at me. Then the voice added, after the smallest pause, and with Lio, if he is present. I closed my eyes. Of course, I muttered, because apparently I cannot simply unclog things in peace. Val actually grinned. Not ghost of humor, not reflex. A real grin, bright and brief, and shockingly alive. Leo, he said, I think your week is still getting worse. I opened one eye at him. Yes, but look at the bright side. What bright side? I smiled despite myself. At least this time, I said, humanity is ruining it with an appointment. And somewhere above us, beyond the steel and conduits and station lights, the future shifted its weight and waited.